How the fuck do you know my name? The troll demanded, his skin crawling even though he was away from the slab. He felt it even now, twisting under his skin. It made him feel sick. You're alive, Time said, frozen motionless. Yeah, Karkat said, torn between thanking the god for saving him and running very far away. The god made him feel like prey. It'll take more than a few knife wounds to kill me. You're alive, the god repeated, staring at Karkat like if he blinked, the troll would vanish. We just agreed on that fact, Karkat said, now nauseous with the surrealistic nature of the entire situation. Now how did you... He trailed off, self-consciously, highly aware that the figure at his side was literally a god that had just casually murdered someone. He scrambled for worshipper tips for this particular god but kept coming up blank. The knight was the most unknown of all the gods, famous for being uninvolved. Karkat wasn't sure what to make of any of this, and it was freaking him the fuck out. Time set a single finger against the troll's throat, and he froze at the unfamiliar touch. He expected to be cold or burn, but instead the god's hand was warm, as his pulse hammered beneath Time's hand. The twisting in his belly calmed immediately as the god's touch erased the hostile magic left over from the slab. It was surprisingly soothing. You are alive, the god said, withdrawing his hand from the troll's pulse like he couldn't believe it until he'd felt the life beating under his skin. Karkat. That's my name, the troll answered. How did you know it? The god blinked at him and his face fell into a smooth, blank expression. All of the life that had so suddenly sprung into being was immediately locked away again. You don't remember, Time said. Remember what? Karkat asked. He felt offensive and he didn't know why. The god's eyes never left him as he squirmed and clamped a hand down across his forearm. Hissing, blood seeped from between his claws. None of the wounds were very deep, but they'd been carved to draw blood and draw lots of it. The troll was beginning to feel lightheaded from the loss. Here, let me help with that. Time jumped up as the gear on the wall flared with light. Karkat wasn't sure how, but suddenly the god's hands were full of bandages. The troll said nothing as the god gently bound the troll's bleeding arms, careful not to touch him again. It was surreal. The Knight of Time was here and was winding bandages around a mutant troll's wounds. This shouldn't be happening. This was far beyond anything that should be possible that Karkat couldn't think around the block in his pan. Instead, he talked. What did you mean, he asked, about me not remembering? He knew the question was on thin ice. He didn't know what would set the god off, and he couldn't stop remembering how those bloody eyes had burned with righteous and silent fury. Why did those cultist fucks try to knife you to death? The god countered evasively. Why did you stop them? Karkat challenged. I didn't ask for your help. He almost wanted to take back the words at the flash of hurt in the god's eyes. Damn his abrasive tongue. He had to remember not to verbally snap at the god like he would anyone else. Okay, Time said, pausing to reset himself. We both have questions that neither of us have answers to, he said. How about we leave off with the interrogation until after we figure out what the fuck is going on? See, you say that and it just leaves me with even more fucking questions than before, the troll said. Could you be any more fucking vague? Shit, his plan to act nicer had failed in less than 5 seconds. The god laughed as Karkat's face flushed with color. He'd just cursed at a god. Smiting was imminent, he was sure of it. Yep, you're definitely Karkat, Time said, not in the least bit offended. Are you sure you don't remember anything? The troll looked at the god, really looked at him. White hair, skin far too pale even by human standards, eyes still faintly glowing with red light. He looked closer, taking in the smooth length of the god's pale neck, over where collarbones just peeked out from the top of the sparse red garment he wore. He was unharmed and barefoot, slim of build and flat-muscled. Something clicked deep in the troll's thinkpan, shifted and shaken, just teasingly out of reach. No, he answered honestly. I don't know what you're talking about. Time didn't react. He must have expected that answer. Listen, he said. What if I could help you remember? Are you saying I've forgotten something? Karkat asked. I'm pretty sure I'd remember ever meeting a god before. I never said that we've met before, Time said smugly, but you knew anyway. Karkat fell silent, nearly biting his tongue. How had he known? Had it just been a lucky guess? The god was almost familiar to him, even as alien and unknowable as he was. Maybe there was something wrong with his memory. So let's say I've been made to forget something, Karkat started. Why would you know why? Maybe, the god said. I'm not sure. You thought I was dead. Karkat suddenly realized why the god had looked at him so strangely. What the fuck happened? I don't know. The god sounded so uncertain. We all thought you were dead. We? Oh fuck, the god jumped up, energy moving through the air around him. You're not dead, I've got to tell the others. What others? Karkat asked. The other gods, Time explained excitedly. You're alive and I found you. He frowned. Also, I should probably let them know that Hemocast cultists are running around trying to murder people to summon us. That's kind of a big problem too. The other gods? Karkat echoed. Why would they care? Trust me, they do, Time said. Are you well enough to travel? There's a town nearby with some temples in it I need to get to. I think so, Karkat said. They only cut to bleed, not cripple. They were going to slit your throat, the god pointed out. Right here. He patted the old stone slab like it didn't make his flesh crawl just from being near. Those fuckers didn't even know what this is, or what they were messing with. Is any of this even real? Karkat asked curiously. Did they actually slit my throat and this is me dead and dreaming? Nope, the god said. You're alive and I'm going to make sure that doesn't change. What the fuck? Let's go, Time said. Those cultists should be far away by now and the moon is setting. You're coming with me? Karkat asked confused. Why? Let's just say I'm very invested in how this turns out, the god answered. And it's been a few centuries since anything half this interesting has happened. As long as I'm down here walking around, I might as well get some shit taken care of. Did they really bind you? Karkat asked cautiously. He recalled the image of Time's shifting form, his splintered edges growing solid as he was wrapped in human flesh. Not they, Time answered. When I heard them call, I bound myself to save you. Only I can bind myself. It's a choice. That didn't sound too bad, but it did make it seem like it was Karkat's fault. So you're human now? Mostly, Time said. I'm in a physical form at this particular moment. But besides that, I'm still me. Being bound isn't bad or anything. It's just a change in form of existence. I now exist physically on this plane. I don't understand any of that, Karkat said blankly. If my plan works, you will, Time promised. Let's go. Karkat stood on shaky legs and swayed to the side. His sense of balance spun as uselessly as the floor beneath him and all his bruises throbbed. He could feel a headache starting. The god seized him gently under an arm and pulled the troll against his side. Easy, Karkat, he said. I can't let you pass out on me. Are you sure you're okay? I'm fine, the troll snapped, hating how weak he was. At his side, the god was warm. He could have sworn he felt a heartbeat in there. Ridiculous. We can rest for tonight, Time said, if you're not fit to travel. Fuck off! Karkat couldn't seem to stop cursing at the night. It must be the blood loss. We'll go slow, the god decided. Somehow he was wearing boots now, and his outfit looked normal and unobtrusive. Though Karkat could still see the red at his sleeves, he could almost have passed for mortal, except for those scarlet eyes. No finery or jewelry accompanied the god of time. The cut of his outfit was simple and clean. He looked like one of 100 travelers. How do you keep doing that? Karkat asked curiously. Magic, Time said simply. It helps me blend in. Magic, Karkat repeated weakly. He slowly traced his steps to the surface. The massive stone doorway that separated the chamber from the rest of the cave system locked itself behind the two of them and vanished without a trace. I'm curious about how they found and then broke into my inner chamber, Time mused. I thought that was one secret I buried deep. I have no idea, Karkat said. I wasn't with them for long enough to learn anything that made sense. I'll take your word for it, the god said. The cave was shallow, and soon the sky was overhead. It was overcast thickly enough that the moon's face was obscured. I hope you know where you're going, Karkat said, as the god didn't even pause to check for directions before turning off and starting for the woods. I don't get lost, Time chimed back at him, and I know this part of the world particularly well. The night was chilled and dark enough for Karkat's eyes to notice the depth of the shadows. The god continued easily through the dark trees without a misstep, even without a torch. How far is this town? Karkat asked. At this speed, the god asked, holding back a wall of vines for the troll to duck under. A little over 2 hours. The sun should rise just as we enter the town. Do you know the town's name? Karkat asked curiously. I did once, Time said, but they probably changed it over time. Karkat walked in silence for a long minute, his think pan stewing. If he had a god as his travel companion, he might as well take the opportunity to learn more about him. When was the last time you walked around like this? It hasn't been long, Time answered smoothly. I've been pulling visitations all over for decades, probably a few dozen times a year. Small miracles, blessings, random not-so-happenstance meetings down lonely back alleys. But it's been a few centuries since I've been fully bound like this. Centuries. It struck Karkat again how old the god was. Time was ancient. He'd been there for the beginning, and would be there to witness the ending. Karkat's entire life was less than a single blink of time to such a being, and the realization of his own spectacular unimportance stopped his tongue for a moment. The hours passed. Karkat was weaker than normal, but he kept the easy pace without complaining. Time almost seemed to know exactly how fast Karkat could drive his feet along before his chest began to feel tight and breathless. The cuts down his arms burned and itched. Hey, Time said as they broke free of the trees and onto a dirt road. You were kidnapped. Isn't there anyone out there that might be worried about you? Again, with Time acting like he cared. There was even an uncertain waver in his voice, almost indistinguishable beneath the cool facade. The troll saw through it immediately. Karkat grimaced. Nope, he said. No one? No one important, Karkat said. He didn't want to admit how much of a nobody he was to the god. No special skills, or talents, or family. There was absolutely nothing interesting about him except for his mutant blood. The god blinked at him, and Karkat couldn't name the emotion he saw flicker behind those clear eyes. We're nearly there, Time said. The sky was turning gray above them, and the troll felt his energy flagging. He'd had a rough few days, and his back and shoulders were sore from the hike. Time seemed to notice without Karkat saying anything. The troll was determined to not look weak before the night of Time. Ahead, smoke trails from chimneys began to show against the rapidly lighting sky, and the troll could smell the rank scent of goats nearby. A dog was barking. The town was small and modest, mostly farmers in a small but respectable market square. The inn was one of the few two-story buildings around. I thought you wanted to find a temple? Karkat asked as he followed the disguised god into town. That can wait until after you get some sleep and food in you, Time said. Karkat's traitorous stomach growled at the mention of food. I thought so, the god joked lightly as Karkat scowled at him. The wooden stone inn was clean cut. A round-faced brown blood with long sweeping horns manned the counter with a young human girl who stared wide-eyed at them as they came in the door. The innkeeper smiled kindly at them. What can I get you two travelers? She asked. A room would be nice, Time said, endlessly charming. A carving of Breath hung on the wall behind the counter. His long windstock painted the color of the sky. The god's sign for breath was strung around the tiny figure's neck. 2 beds or one? The innkeeper asked. Just one is fine, the god answered as Karkat's face flushed. With breakfast if you can. That'll be 3 crowns extra, the innkeeper replied, already rummaging through the drawer at her side for a key. Time put a hand in a pocket and somehow drew out the exact coin to cover the cost. Drusilla will show you to your room, she said, handing the child a tin key. If there's anything you'd like, you just let me know. Thank you, Time said, and the child tugged at his sleeve with her tiny fingers. This way, misters, she chimed. I'll bring up your food as soon as it's fixed. Karkat followed after the two of them, the girl chattering away like a sparrow as the god attentively listened with an easy grin. The room was small, sparse, and well put together. It was far better than the other inns the troll had stayed at. The door even came with its own lock, and the straw mattress wasn't attempting to crawl away. "You should get some rest," Time said as the door closed behind them. "How are your arms doing?" "Do I even want to know how you could afford this?" Karkat asked to cover up his sudden unease. He'd been alone with the god for several hours, but in a cramped and locked room it was different. In such a small space, it was hard to ignore how the god felt so much bigger than the room could contain. Karkat could feel it prickling behind his eyes whenever he caught Time's still form in the corner of his gaze. "The cultists robbed me of everything I had." The god shrugged. "People throw coins into church fountains all the time," he said. "They leave offerings, too." "Priest collects all of that for the church and the poor," Karkat said. "They do," Time nodded, "but I can still take a few coins from my alcoves and shrines." It sounded just right enough for Karkat not to argue, though he couldn't remember ever seeing offerings at any of the scarce shrines pledged in the honor of the elusive knight. "Why the one bed if you're loaded?" Karkat asked curiously, not even surprised that the god was as rich as a king. It was only fitting. "I don't really sleep," Time admitted. "The bed's for you." The troll filed away the information away in his think pan. The knowledge that the god wouldn't make this single bed situation a big deal did make him feel better. There was a knock on the door. "Food's ready, misters," came the small girl's voice. Time greeted the girl warmly and thanked her for the food. He even handed her a shiny penny as she left, which she stared at and giggled before running off with it clenched in her fist. "Eat up," the god said, turning back with the steaming plate in his hands. "Then sleep." "What about you?" Karkat asked curiously. "I'm going to poke around the town, see what there is to see." That didn't sound suspicious in the least, but what could Karkat say about it? It wasn't that he was afraid of rebuking the god, fuck that. But he did understand that there were things he simply didn't understand about Time and his motives. The disconnect was just enough to make him pause. "Stay out of trouble then," Karkat said. "Towns like this don't like outsiders." "I make no promises," the god joked. "See you later, Karkat." The words brought him up short. That cheerful phrase, said so effortlessly, rang through Karkat's head. He was certain he'd heard Time say that before. He must have. The memory was there, tantalizingly out of reach, as the god ducked out of the room. For the first time since Time had mentioned lost memories, he felt like it wasn't the bullshit he thought it had been.